record. Dakina, welcome Dakina. Okay. I think, yes, we still have a few minutes. So meanwhile, I can at least point out that this is Āryadeva, is one image of Āryadeva, and the text we are going to read is a text by Āryadeva. Today, hopefully, there will be no interruptions. I've ensured that the 40 minutes limit doesn't apply, so I think it should be easier than yesterday. Okay, more people. Okay, now we have 9 people. I'm glad that several of you have arrived early. Thank you for that. Makes things easier. Hello, Big. Rosie. Hi, Rosie. And some ID that I don't recognize. Chepal. Hi, Chepal. Sorry, I'm muting everyone to avoid echoes, but feel free to unmute yourselves even when needed if you want to say something. And also you can always use the chat. Usually I will get orange alert when there is a chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. Vivek. Okay. Let me see. All the participants have been muted except one. Let me be muted. Well, we could wait a few minutes, but rather let me start by saying at least a few words about the text that we're going to read. This is the Jnanasara Samuccaya by Āryadeva. Āryadeva, as many of you will know, was the main student of Arya Nagarjuna. and both of them are believed to be Mahasiddhas. Some modern scholars do not consider this text to be by the Āryadeva, but traditionally it is considered to be so. And in fact, the text is larger than the verses that I plan to read with you. But these particular verses happen to be very influential in both the Indian and the Tibetan traditions. In the Indian tradition, we find that both Buddhist and non-Buddhist follow very often the presentation of the four Buddhist systems, the four Buddhist siddhantas or sthiti or mata, in accordance with this text. And in this system, Madhyamaka is presented as the highest view. So both Buddhists representing their own view, especially when they are Madhyamaka, of course, as well as non-Buddhists offering a summary of Buddhist views, will follow this four Siddhanta, four Sthiti system, which comes primarily from this text. So in that way, it is a very important text. And also the Tibetan Drupta tradition follows the same pattern. They all use this four Siddhanta system. So from that perspective, just these few verses happen to be particularly important. And today we will focus on the initial verses, 3 verses, which introduce the topic of the Buddhist systems. That's what one verse does. And that describe the Vaibhāṣika view. So this is going to be today's topic. So now I want to discuss, well, before I discuss the actual text, I like to chant something, and these are common Buddhist chants, which some of you might know in the first one, at least in its Pali version, but we chant it in Sanskrit. So I will chant everything 3 times, and feel free to follow, especially if you know it. Namastasmai bhagavater-hate samyak sambuddhaya. Namastasmai bhagavater-hate samyak sambuddhaya. Namastasmai bhagavater-hate samyak sambuddhaya. Then Manjushri. Namo Manjushri Kumara Bhutaya. Namo Manjushri Kumara Bhutaya. Namo Manjushri Kumara Bhutaya. And then a famous verse of praise of the 3 jewels. Namo Buddhaya Gurave. Namo Dharmaya Taine. Namaste Tribhyopi Satatam Namaha. Namo Buddhaya Gurave. Namo Dharmaya Taine. Namasanghaya Mahate. Tribhyopi Satatam Namaha. Namo Buddhaya Gurave. Namo Dharmaya Taine. Namasanghaya Mahate. Tribhyopi Satatam Namaha. And then the 4 mudras, the 4 seals of the Buddhist view. Sarva samskara anityaha. Sarva samskara dukkhaha. Sarva dharma anatmanaha. Shantam nirvanam. Sarva samskara anityaha. Sarva samskara dukkhaha. Sarva dharma anatmanaha. Shantam nirvanam. Sarva samskara anityaha. Sarva samskara dukkhaha. Sarva dharma anatmanaha. Shantam Nirvanam. This will turn out to be useful later when we go back to the specifics of Vaibhāṣika view, because we can look back at these four statements and briefly discuss how the Vaibhāṣikas interpret them. Now, I want to go back briefly to the title of this text, Jnana Sara Samuccaya. So it's a compendium, Samuccaya, this word here, Samuccaya, of the essence, Sara, of awareness, Jnana. Now, we can translate Jnana in many different ways. I have reasons to prefer awareness because I think it works for both of the main usages of Jnana. So there are cases where Jnana is just a synonym of Vijnana, so it has a sense akin to cognition, awareness of an object. And then there are contexts where it is clearly differentiated from Vijnana, from consciousness, from the cognition of an object. In that case, some people translate it even as gnosis. And so to offer you an example of Vijnana, and this example is very important to understand Āryadeva's presentation of the four Siddhantas. This is a standard example from the sutras, which is the eye consciousness, so visual consciousness, arises utpadyate, depending upon the eye, chakshuhu pratitya, and depending on visible forms, rupani cha. So this is a standard explanation found in the sutras of how consciousness arises. So in other words, consciousness needs to have a basis, which is a sense faculty, and the sense faculty is a type of special kind of rupa, special type of materiality, clear rupa, clear form, and also an object. And in the case of the eye, the object of the eye is called rupa in the sense of visible form. So we can change this sentence as appropriate to fit to the other types of consciousness, such as ear consciousness, nose, etc., etc. But the basic point is that there is an ashraya, a basis, a faculty, and an object. So these two causes, these two conditions are necessary for the arising of consciousness. Now, what about jnana? For jnana, I want to turn to the Lankavatara Sutra, the Sutra of the descent into Lanka, requested by Ravana, where the main interlocutor happens to be Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahamati, and here the Buddha offers one brief explanation of the difference between jnana and vijnana. And you will see that there is a touch of etymology here as well, nirukti. So, O Mahamati, Mahamate, moreover, punaraparam, asangalakshanam jnana. So, awareness, jnanam, has as its defining trait, lakshana, as its characteristic, asanga, lack of attachment. And vijnana, consciousness, has as its defining trait, lakshanam, sanga, attachment. Attachment to what? Vishaya vaichitriya, to the variegatedness of objects. Vishaya means more literally something like a domain, but it refers to the various objects that can be perceived by consciousness. So consciousness is attached to this variegatedness of objects, while the characteristic of awareness is to be free of any attachment. And this is a recurrent thing. And I was talking about etymology. Something that we lose in translation is that I think here it is implied when we have vijnanam, the V is reflected here, Vishaya. Okay, so we can understand in a way that this text, this whole treatise by Āryadeva is about how to go from vijnana to jnana, to this awareness that is not stuck anywhere and that is ultimately the cause of liberation, purification and eventual liberation and omniscience. So here let's start with the first of the verses that we are going to read. And this is actually verse 20 in the original text, but this is where the presentation of the Buddhist positions begins. So let me read it first. This is the verse. I hope you can all see it. Buddhaischturvidho dharmo drishtah purvam manishibihi vaibhāṣikādayo marga bhāṣitās tattvasadhane. Buddhaischturvidho dharmo drishtah purvam manishibihi Vaibhāṣikādayo marga bhāṣitās tattvasadhane. Okay, when we split the sandhi, it looks like this. Buddhaihi chaturvidaha dharmaha drishtaha purvam manishibihi Vaibhāṣika ādayaha margaha bhāṣitaha tattva sadhane. So how does this sentence work? The dharma which was previously taught by the Buddha, and we understand taught as implied, Buddhaihi chaturvidaha dharma. So this dharma implied taught by the Buddha, drishtaha has been seen, purvam manishibihi, in the past, by manishibihi, by the wise ones who accept the mind. I will explain to you why I translated it in this awkward manner. The wise who accept the mind. So it has been seen to be chaturvidaha, of four types, fourfold. What are the four types? Vaibhāṣika ādayaha margaha. So the paths, margaha, which begin ādayaha with the Vaibhāṣika, have been spoken of, have been explained, bhāṣitaha, tattva sadhane, in order to establish the nature of things, in order to accomplish the nature of things, if you wish. Tattva means something like reality, is a pronoun tat plus taddita suffix tva, something like thatness, and it indicates the nature of that, so the nature of things. So now we have the expression Vaibhāṣika ādaya. What does it mean? What does this etc. mean? It refers to these four schools. Vaibhāṣika, Sautrantika, Yogacara, and Madhyamaka. These two schools are generally believed to be Shravaka schools, so non-Mahayana schools, although there are some exceptions. Some that believe that the Sautrantika is a suitable basis to practice the Mahayana. These two schools, Yogacara and Madhyamaka, are considered to be Mahayana philosophical schools. So today we will focus on the Vaibhāṣika. And this happens to be particularly important because the Vaibhāṣika is usually where we get the explanation, the overview of what are called the five realities, the Panchavastu. And this basic framework is relevant for all of these four schools. So although many of us do not spend much time studying Vaibhāṣika, this actually really affects our ability to understand the other schools. And I think it is worthwhile to make that effort. Now, Bodhibhadra, important commentator of this text, has an explanation. It's actually originally in Tibetan. This is a back translation from the Tibetan, but nevertheless, it can give us an idea of how ingeniously he reads the word Manishin. Because normally, Manishin, we would understand as coming from the word Manisha, which means wisdom or intelligence. And so Manishin is a wise person. But actually, he understands it in a slightly different way from Ishyate, in a way. So it's the people who accept that it is the mind that causes bondage or liberation. Those people are called Manishin for him. So he offers us this special explanation of this word. And here I have reproduced it. Kayena va vacha va muktir nuvapadyate. So muktihi, liberation, does not make sense, is not possible as coming by means of the body or by means of speech. Muktir va bandhanam va mana indriya adhikarena eva iti. So liberation or bondage, muktihi va bandhanam va, is according to the adhikara, the jurisdiction only, of the mana indriya, the mind faculty, so only due to the mind. Ye, so this is sandhi, ya evam abhyupagachanti, those who accept this, te tava manishina eva. Those are, they are called manishin, so those who accept the mind. Okay, so this is Bodhibhadra's special explanation of the word Manishi that is in the verse. I think that I have basically explained everything in the verse. Let's have a look at the verse just once again. Buddhaischadurvidho dharmo drushtah purvam manishibhi Vaibhāṣikādayo marga bhāṣitas tattva sadhane. So, and here you can have a look at the meaning briefly. I hope that you can follow. This is just a kind of introductory verse, giving us a kind of uddesha, an initial implied list that is going to be explained next. So this is our main uddesha, our main list. So what is going to be explained is these 4 margas. And now we start with Vaibhāṣika. So why are they called Vaibhāṣikas? Now I will briefly explain. This is something that Vasubandhu says in the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya. First of all, Abhidharma is necessary in order to obtain wisdom, prajna, dharma pravichaya, the classification of the dharmas, which is going to cause us to relinquish mental afflictions. Why? Because it is thanks to recognizing the various entities of name and form that make up the mind and body that we will see that there is no permanent self. When we see that there is no permanent self, then there is no basis for our delusion, attachment, or aversion to arise. So Abhidharma, this instruction in the Abhidharma, in the defining traits of the dharmas, is necessary for that purpose. Did the Buddha himself teach the Abhidharma? According to the Vaibhāṣikas, yes. What they say is that the Buddha taught it in a scattered way, here and there, not as systematized treatises. And then the great Shravakas collected these sayings of Abhidharma together as a certain number of treatises. Just like the Udana Vargiya was collected by Dharmatrata. So this is the example of Udana Varga, the Sanskrit parallel of the Dhammapada, for those of you who are familiar with the Pali tradition. So what are these treatises of the Abhidharma accepted by the Sarvastivada? it's these 7. So you can see, although the Theravada tradition also has 7 treatises, the list is completely different and there is very little overlap. If you're interested in that particular topic, you may find some overlap, I believe, in the Dharmaskanda, between the Dharmaskanda and the Vibhanga. So if you compare some parts of the Dharmaskanda and some parts of the Pali Vibhanga, you will find some overlap. Unfortunately, most of these texts are not available in Sanskrit. We have parts of the Dharmaskanda, for example, but most of these actually, only exist in Chinese translation, not even in Tibetan. And this also includes the Vaibhāṣika, this great commentary, which is a commentary on the Jnana Prasthana. So this commentary also survives only in Chinese translation, although I believe now it has been translated from Chinese into Tibetan, but doesn't exist in Sanskrit, unfortunately. And this commentary is what gives the Vaibhāṣikas their name. Vaibhāṣika means someone who follows the Vibhāṣa. Just like Bauddha is a follower of the Buddha, Saugata is a follower of the Sugata. So it's a Taddhita form from the word Vibhāṣa. So that's why they're called Vaibhāṣika. Many of their philosophical positions are derived from what we find in this Mahavibhāṣa. They are also sometimes called Sarvastivada, although Sarvastivada is a broader term, but because they believe that Sarvam Asti, everything exists, and by everything they mean past, present, and future dharmas. All of them exist in a different way, but all of them exist. Maybe we will get back to this point later on. So this is a brief introduction to the Vaibhāṣika, just so that you know what we're about to see in the verses themselves. So this is the first verse describing the Vaibhāṣika position. Akasham dvau nirodhau cha nityam trayama samskritam kshanikam sarvam atma shunyam akartrakam. Akasham dvau nirodhau cha nityam trayama samskritam kshanikam sarvam atma shunyam akartrakam. Okay. And if we divide the sandhi, we get this. Akasham dvau nirodhau cha nityam trayam samskritam kshanikam sarvam atma shunyam akartrakam. So this indicates implicitly some of the special features of the Vaibhāṣika list of real entities. So we can start from this, Nityam Trayam Asamskritam. So there are 3 entities, Trayam, which are not produced, Asamskritam, which is the same as saying Apratitya Samutpannam, not dependently arisen. They do not come from causes and conditions, and they are Nityam. They are permanent. What are they? Akasham dvau nirodhau cha. So Akasha means space. Dvau nirodhau means the 2 types of cessation. So space and 2 types of cessation. We will get back to the 2 types of cessation as well later. Cessation that comes from analysis, pratisankhya nirodha, and cessation which doesn't come from analysis, apratisankhya nirodha. So they accept that 3 types of entities are permanent. That's the starting point. So Do they believe in impermanence and momentariness? Yes. Samskritam kshanikam sarvam. So, sarvam, everything that is samskritam, that is produced by causes and conditions, kshanikam, is um, momentary. Atma shunyam, it is devoid of a self, akartrakam, and it is devoid of a creator. Actually, we can also read it in this way, if we, and maybe it might even be better now that I think of it. So, this is the description of the asamskara dharmas. So, these dharmas are permanent. This we can take as one sentence. Samskritam kshanikam. So that which comes from causes and conditions is momentary. Sarvam, everything whatsoever, is Atma Shunyam and Akaratrakam, because Atma Shunyam actually also applies to the Asamskritam. So everything is devoid of a self and devoid of a creator. We can also take it in that way. We can take the Sarvam either here or the Sarvam here. We can choose, actually. Both of those options are there in terms of grammar. So now, if you look at this, you can see perhaps what I implied earlier on when I said that the four statements, the four mudras of all the that describe a Buddhist view actually turn out to be useful when understanding Vaibhāṣika. So let me go back to that for a moment and explain it again according to how the Vaibhāṣikas would understand it. So, sarva samskara anityaha, all the assembled factors, compositional factors, are impermanent, but not the asamskrita, you see? So this doesn't say sarva dharma, it just says sarva samskara. It doesn't say that all entities without any further qualification are impermanent. Then sarva samskara dukkha. Actually, Vaibhāṣika say that this, to be strict, applies to all of them except for the truth of the path, marga satya. So it applies to all the dharmas, all the produced dharmas, which are with outflows, which means those are dharmas where the mental afflictions are going to stick like dirt on a wet cloth. So those kinds of dharmas are suffering either because they have the nature of suffering or they cause suffering. But the truth of the path is not like that. Because if one engages with the truth of the path, the mental afflictions cannot stick to it. And that's why it can be the support for purification. All the dharmas are selfless, and that works with what we have just read. Sarvam atma shunyam akartrakam and shantam nirvanam. Okay, this works for all. Nirvana is peace. And these actually would be related to the asamskritas. So you can see that the Vaibhāṣikas have a special way of understanding these four statements. Okay, let's go back to the verse. Key term, samskrita. I have translated it as co-produced, and this term is recurrent, very important for the whole Buddhist tradition. So I want to offer you the explanation that Vasubandhu gives. So first of all, what do the Samskrita dharmas, these co-produced dharmas, include? Well, they include the five aggregates: form, feeling, assembled factors, and consciousness. Rupa, Vedana. Oops, Samnya has gone away. I have to add it, sorry. I don't know why it's not here. Yeah, strange. The aggregate of notions, yes, and the aggregate of consciousness. This is the wrong place. Let me move it. Yeah. So the five aggregates include only the impermanent, dependently arisen entities. They don't include permanent entities. Those can be included in the 12 entrances or the 18 bases, but they cannot be included in the five aggregates. Okay, now he offers us an etymology of the word Samskrita, which is my own basis, together with how it is rendered in Tibetan, to translate it as co-produced. Samitya sambhuya pratyayehi kritaha iti samskritaha. So they are called Samskrita because they are krita. They are produced, they are made, they are created. Pratyayehi, by conditions. Samitya, after they come together. Sambhuya, after they are together. So you can see how this etymology works. You have the element of sam here, you see, and then you have krita. And then these two elements together, you get Samskrita. So there's two elements expressed by Samskrita according to Vasubandhu. Krita meaning produced and sam meaning coming together. That's why I translate as co-produced, because these are the two elements which, according to Vasubandhu, are expressed by the sounds of this word. And why are they so explained? Nahi eka pratyaya janitam kinchidasti. For he, there is nothing, na kinchidasti, that is generated, janitam, by a single eka condition, pratyaya. So for example, earlier we saw the case of Chakshur Vijnana, the eye consciousness. The eye consciousness is Chakshu Pratitya Rupani Cha. It's dependent on the eye and on visible form. So it's not generated by a single condition, and nothing is generated in that way. So the word Samskrita has embedded in itself an important principle of dependent arising, namely that nothing comes from a single cause. That's according to this explanation. Now, to understand all these four Siddhantas, but especially Vaibhāṣika, this list of the Panchavastu, the five realities, is of crucial importance, as I had indicated earlier. What are the five Vastus? The first one is called Rupa, or form, sometimes translated as materiality. And this is, has got a spatial location. It exists somewhere. And also it has got a kind of physical presence, murti. And it comprises of, first of all, the four great elements, Prithvi, Tejo, and Vayu, these four, earth, water, heat, and wind. These refer to atoms which have got certain properties. It doesn't refer to earth as we normally see it, or water as we normally see it, etc. That would probably be a mixture of these four. Then we have derivative form, or form that depends on the four great elements, upadaya rupa, and this includes visible form, sound, smell, taste, and a few others. So they arise together. Usually we have a minimum of 8 atoms, the four great elements plus another 4, and sometimes on top of that we have sound, sometimes we don't have sound, etc. Then there is non-cognizable form, which is also a type of derivative form, and this is a special feature of Vaibhāṣika. This is a continuum of form, so it really continues in the body when we do a karmically relevant activity. So the important example for this is when we take vows. So when we say Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, we take the refuge vow and we prostrate. Those activities of speech and body will create a continuum within the body. So because this continuum is a continuum of form, this is actually their explanation of why the refuge vow is disintegrated when we die. So when we die, our refuge vow is gone. In the next life, we have to take it again. It doesn't automatically carry on to the next lifetime. Another key point of Vaibhāṣika is the idea of Anu or Paramanu. So Anu or Paramanu is an ultimate bit, sometimes translated as atom, but the point is that this has no extension, no parts. So it's a partless part of which all extended entities are made. The Paramanus come together, they coordinate into groups, and they give rise to entities which are causal continuum of Paramanus, such as tables, chairs, computers, etc., etc. So this is the Vaibhāṣika view of the ultimate atoms. And again, this is quite important because the basic principle to accept that something is really existent, according to Abhidharma Kosha itself, is that we cannot break it up either physically or with our mind. So the Paramanus cannot be broken up because they're partless. And the difficult point in this system is to explain how we get to extended entities. And the Vaibhāṣikas have rather ingenious ways to tell us how the Paramanus coordinate, etc., etc. So this is Rupa. This is the first of the Panchavastu. Then we have Chitta or mind. So of course, this is extremely important, but in fact, the definitions of mind are very brief. Mind is understood as Vijñapti or Upalabdhi, meaning perception or apprehension of Vishaya, of an object, of Vastu. So, but it's the perception of a mere object. And while the definition is so simple, it is said that consciousness is normally taught last when we teach the 5 aggregates because it is very subtle. So in other words, it might be easy to conceptually follow the definition of Vijnana, but recognizing Vijnana in one's own continuum of 5 aggregates is actually extremely difficult. So it's conceptually easy in terms of the definition, in the sense that it's not a complicated or long definition, but it is very difficult to, in fact, recognize which one is Vijnana when we try to observe our own 5 aggregates. Then there is the Chaita, mental states, also called Chitta Samprayukta Samskara, and I will get back to that. So the idea is that Chitta, mind, never arises on its own. It always arises accompanied by mental states. And there are certain mental states which accompany every moment of mind. For example, Vedana. Vedana, feeling, always accompanies the mind. It can be a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling, but each moment of mind is accompanied by Vedana. And the other name, Chitta Samprayukta Samskara, means that these are assembled factors. So impermanent entities, which are samprayukta. They function together, they are applied together with the mind, citta. What do we mean by applying together? Well, this sum, according to tradition, refers to 5 types of sameness. What does it mean? The first sameness is the sameness of the basis, ashraya. What does it mean? Visual consciousness, chakshur vijnana, and all the mental states, all the chaitas that arise together with that visual consciousness actually arise on the basis of the same faculty. So they arise all on the basis of the chakshurindriya, of the eye faculty. They have the same ashraya, the same basis. Then their object, they take the same object, alambana. So when you have chakshur vijnana, the eye consciousness, its object is visible form. So let's say you're looking at a computer. The computer is the alambana, the object of that visual consciousness. It is also the object of the accompanying mental state. So if that visual consciousness is pleasant, that feeling or that pleasant feeling also has the same object. To give an example of one mental state. Then the akara, the configuration or aspect, is also the same. So for example, if a visual consciousness is perceiving a patch of blue, the Vedana, the pleasant feeling is also about a patch of blue, the same patch of blue. It has the same configuration. And then time, this just means that the cognition and the accompanying states occur at the same time. And also substance, dravya, and here it means that one visual consciousness will be accompanied by one feeling, so one Vedana, only one samnya, etc., etc. Not 3 or 4 Vedanas, not 3 or 4 samnyas, etc. So these are the 5 samenesses due to which they're said to be samprayukta, operating together or applied together, etc., or joined together. Now there is the 4th of the Panchavastu, the 5 realities, is a special category of Vaibhāṣika called Chitta Viprayukta Samskara. So these are assembled factors, so they are impermanent entities that are Viprayukta, they do not operate together with the mind. So they are Chitta Viprayukta. However, they are like the mind because they do not exist somewhere. They do not have a location in space or a kind of physical presence. So they have some similarity to the mind. However, they are not really part of sentience because they do not perceive anything. That's why we do not have those samatas. They're not working together with the mind towards the perception of an object. This is a very varied category, which includes a number of entities which the Vaibhāṣikas believe are necessary to explain how things work. So, for example, the Vaibhāṣikas believe that all the impermanent entities are characterized by certain defining traits, such as arising, abiding, decay, and disappearance. These 4 are in their turn impermanent entities. They're entities in their own right. And they fall under this Chitta Viprayukta Samskara. So they do not really belong to materiality. They also don't belong to sentience. But they help the functioning of every moment of either materiality or sentience. And this is just one example. There's a number of other such categories for the Vaibhāṣikas. And then we have the asamskrita. So I told you earlier that we would get back to these three, especially the two types of Nirodha. So Vaibhāṣikas accept that there are three types of entities which are not dependently arisen. And these are space, akasha, cessation due to analysis, pratisankhya, nirodha, and cessation which is not due to analysis, apratisankhya, nirodha. What is space? Lack of obstruction, anavriti. Wherever form can move, that is actually considered to be an entity, a permanent entity called space. What is cessation due to analysis? This is the analysis on the, by analysis here it is meant the analysis on the four truths of the Noble Ones, which causes a cessation of the mental afflictions. So for each mental affliction, when it is abandoned, there is one cessation. There are as many cessations as there are mental afflictions to be abandoned. The other type of cessation not due to analysis is simply when something ceases, doesn't continue due to lack of causes and conditions. So these are the two types of cessation. Some Vaibhāṣikas have the idea that actually dependent arising itself is a type of non-produced entity. And the reason is because there are sutras like the Bhikshu Sutra where it is said that whether the Tathagatas arise or not, this is the fixed nature of things. Dependent arising. When this is there, that is there, etc., etc. So they take it to mean that the Buddha accepts a permanent entity called dependent arising. But other Vaibhāṣikas discard this view, and what they say is that it is a misinterpretation of those sutras. They understand it as meaning that that process and the regularities of dependent arising always apply. They're always valid, and they do not depend on whether somebody realizes them or not. They're just there. So it doesn't imply for them a separate entity called dependent arising and being a permanent entity. So I think that this is, yeah, the explanation of verse 21. So let's briefly go back to the verse. I think that after going through the Panchavastu, maybe the verse now might be a little clearer. Let me read it again. Akasham dvau nirodhau cha nityam trayam samskritam samskritam kshanikam sarvam atma shunyam akartrakam. So I did not say much about the word akartrakam. I should. It means without a creator except for karma. So this is one important point in the Buddhist tradition. Karmajam loka vaichitriam. The variety of the world is created by karma. So one point made by some Buddhist authors when they respond to the non-Buddhist idea, such as the Nyaya idea, that everything is created by an omnipotent Ishvara, an omnipotent Lord, is that even if they want to accept that things are created by something which is preceded by the mind, what they don't accept is that that is a single mind and that that mind is omniscient. In fact, it is the collective mind. Well, it's the collective karma of sentient beings at a certain point which prompts the generation of a new universe. And karma comes from mind. So actually, if we want to identify a kartra, that is the mind. Ultimately, it is the mind that makes up the whole universe. Even for those who do not believe that everything literally is the mind has a prominent causal role. And this, I think, most of you will know just from having read some verses of the Dhammapada or Udana Varga. Manaf Purvam Gama Dharma. Right? I think that many of you are familiar with that. So, Akasham Dvaunirodhatu Nityantrayama Samskritam. The three types of non-produced, unproduced entities are Nityam, are permanent. What are they? Akasham Dvaunirodhaucha. space and the two types of cessation. Samskritam kshanikam, sarvam, and we can decide where to put the sarvam, with Samskritam kshanikam or with Atma Shunyam Akartrakam. So the co-produced is all momentary. Atma Shunyam Akartrakam. It is empty of the self. So this is the mudra, the mark of selflessness, and Akaratraka. Actually, incidentally, and this I think is another remarkable feature of this text, this tells us how the Shravaka schools understand shunyata, emptiness. Emptiness for them is atma shunya, in the sense of the dharmas are there, they really arise and cease, but there is no self above them. That's what is normally called pudgala nairatmya, the selflessness of person. So this usage also is, I think, very thoughtful and useful to understand the relationship between the Shravaka and Mahayana schools. So I hope this verse is somewhat clear. The next verse deals more specifically with cognition, and this is, in a way, one of the salient features of this presentation of the four Siddhantas. So this is our verse. Akshara dhiranakara sakshat vedanusanchayam dhimatam iti kashmira vaibhāṣika matam. Akshara dhiranakara sakshat vedanusanchayam dhimatam iti kashmira vaibhāṣika matam. Okay, now if we split the sandhi, aksha ja dhihi an akara sakshat veda anu sanchayam dhimatam iti kashmira vaibhāṣika matam. Okay, what does it mean? Dhihi. You know this syllable probably. It means sometimes wisdom, sometimes it is a synonym of prajna, but here actually it just means cognition. It's more of a synonym of buddhi or vijnana. So it just means cognition. What kind of dhihi? Aksha ja. So this refers to pratyaksha, direct perception, generated ja by the sense faculties. Aksha. Aksha here is a synonym of indriya. So for example, chakshur vijnana. Anakara, important point. It doesn't have any aspect. It doesn't have any configuration. It's like a transparent crystal. It has no form. It is shapeless. And it directly, sakshat, sees Veda, and here this is a strange, slightly strange thing, it's a perfect of it, anu sanchayam, the collection of atoms. So consciousness directly perceives the collection of atoms. So the akara, the shape, pertains to the way in which the collection of atom is placed. It doesn't pertain to the mind. The mind has no shape, and the mind is perceiving the shape that pertains to the object, which is a collection of atoms. This is the key point in terms of how they understand the arising of cognition. This is considered to be matam, di matam iti, belonging to wise people, Kashmira Vaibhāṣika matam, the system of thought, matam, of a Kashmira Vaibhāṣika, the Vaibhāṣika of Kashmir. Somehow Kashmir had become the seat of orthodox Vaibhāṣika. There were other Vaibhāṣikas such as the Madhya Deshiya, etc., but the ones which were considered to be really orthodox Vaibhāṣika were in Kashmir. In fact, the Abhidharma Kosha itself, the Karika, the root verses, explain the Kashmira Vaibhāṣika position specifically. So, one key word that I included here is the word akara. This is an important word, difficult to translate. I chose configuration because I feel that somehow it represents the etymology. But also aspect, I think, is fine. And this refers to, let's say, a computer as a certain configuration, a certain aspect. A sound also appears with a certain aspect. So these are all aspects that some believe pertain to the object. So we actually perceive the object as having that aspect, and others believe pertain only to the mind. So in other words, as we will see, the Sautrantikas say, no, the mind is perceiving itself as appearing with such and such an aspect. But the important point for the presentation of Vaibhāṣika here is that the mind directly sees the collection of atoms. So in other words, in this view, the mind has a very direct relationship with outer object. There is no question of putting into question outer objects. Outer objects are always directly perceived by the mind. So you can see this is one reason, probably, why this system, from a Madhyamaka perspective, is considered to be the most basic. Because even as far as the outer object is concerned, in this system, the relationship with the outer object is direct, is very strong, is unquestionable. Although, of course, the outer object in its nature might be different from the way we normally conceptualize it. Okay, let me read this verse again. Akshajadhiranakara sakshad vedanusanchayam dhimatam iti kashmira Vaibhāṣika matam. Okay, so these are the verses which summarize the Vaibhāṣika view. I think that is all I wanted to say for today. Before we read the dedication of merit, if you have any questions, please let me know. You can either unmute yourselves and ask a question, or you can write a question on the chat. So do you have any questions?
I have a question about the truth cessation that is, they say it is permanent.
Yes.
Like it is permanent in the sense of Samskrita Dharma, or like, can you a bit elaborate on that?
They are obtained, they are not made to arise. So these cessations are free from arising and cessation. They are free from arising, from abiding, from decay, and from cessations. They are obtained by the mind, but they're not made to arise. Since we do not have arising, abiding, decay, or cessation, they're said to be permanent.
But they are obtained.
They can be obtained, yes. Well, one of them, for the one which comes from the analysis of the four truths of the Noble Ones.
And does it not contradict with the second sentence that all is Sunya, Akritam, something?
No, because the second sentence just says that it's free of a self, it's empty of a self. Atma Shunyam. Atma Shunyam, even something permanent, can be without a self. They do not identify a self necessarily just with the property of permanence.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Professor, may I ask a question? Can you please scroll back to the page there's a list of the first one is the 4 great elements, and then there's the something anu something. What's yes? There's one. Yes, yes. What is the difference between the four great elements and the anu paramanu?
Paramanu is a broader category which applies both to all of the types of rupa, not just to the four great elements. All the types of rupa are made of anu.
Do you imply that the four great elements are also considered under anu?
They're all made of anu. Yeah, you see, rupa is made of paramanus, you see? And rupa includes all of this, all these three. All types of rupa are made of paramanu. So the category paramanu just tells you how big the entities of rupa are, irrespective of whether those are four great elements or whether those are derivative of the four great elements. All of them are, in terms of size, paramanu.
I see. The reason I ask is so I can make sure that these lists are not exclusively, they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh, no, no, no. The list is just this much. This is the list of the types of rupa. And then it says that rupa in general is made of ultimate bits. So this just tells you something about all types of rupa.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I see another question by Marco. Tibetan lamas sometimes translate samskaras as karmic traces passing from life to life. Is it correct? It depends from the context. That really depends on the context. But in the context of the 12 limbs of dependent arising, the limb called samskara is considered to fall under karma. So in that particular context, that could be okay. It's more of an explanation than a translation, perhaps. But in the context that we're looking at now, like when we say sarva samskaraha, this refers to all the entities, impermanent entities, when looked upon as causes, those which produce kara after coming together, some. So it really depends from context. That happens quite often, actually, that the same word can have a broader meaning or a more restricted meaning. Okay. Any other questions?
Acharya, sorry. It wasn't very clear for me when you explained the difference between Sarva Samskara and Sarva Dharma.
Okay. Samskara are impermanent because they are dharmas which function as causes. Dharma is a broader category which includes both those dharmas which are dependently arisen, which are produced by causes and conditions, as well as those dharmas which are unproduced, which do not come from causes and conditions. So the word dharma is more inclusive. Samskaras are a subgroup within dharmas. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Other questions? Any other questions? I'll wait for 5 seconds. No questions. Then I'm going to go to the dedication of merit. I will read it 3 times. Those of you who know or who want to try can join. Anena punyena tu sarvadarshitam avapya nirjitya chadosha vitpisha jararuja mrityu mahormisankulat samudhareyam bhavasagarajjagat anena punyena tu sarvadarshitam avapya nirjitya cha dosha vidvishah jararuja mrityu mahormisankulat samudhareyam bhavasagarajjagat anena punyena tu sarvadarshitam avapya nirjitya cha dosha vidvishah jararuja mrityu mahormisankulat samudhareyam bhavasagarad jagat. Thank you very much. If I can organize myself, then tomorrow I will explain the Sautrantika. Otherwise, I will send you information on the Facebook page whenever that will happen. So thank you for participating, and see you next time. Thank you very much.